Hello horror hounds, welcome back to our look through film by film the works of David Cronenberg, up to a certain point at least. And we're at his second feature, Rabid, from 1977. In many ways it's a kind of do-over of his first film, Shivers. Certainly it's a sister film to that debut, only painted on a broader canvas. The UK horror author James Herbert did something similar in his early career. In 1975 he published The Fog, a novel about an escaped chemical weapon that turned people into homicidal maniacs. He was surprised by how much he could get away with in that novel and thought later he'd see how much further he could push things. So in 1980 he released The Dark, a different setup, a similar premise, this time supernatural. But as the darkness of that novel spreads, it too turns those it touches into homicidal maniacs. So the scope is broader, the envelope is pushed a little further. So just as James Herbert's The Dark is to The Fog, to my mind, so David Cronenberg's Rabid is to Shivers. This is Rabid. Marilyn Chambers plays a woman who is injured in a motorcycle accident near the Keloid Clinic, a facility at the forefront of plastic surgery. Too injured to make the journey to the nearest hospital facility, she undergoes treatment at the clinic. The skin grafts they've pioneered there are morphogenically neutral, which allows the grafts to replace damaged skin and organs. These days I guess we'd be talking about stem cells. Except her graft develops into a brand new organ, and in true Cronenbergian fashion she develops an anus-like orifice in her left armpit which contains a phallic stinger that she uses to feed on other people's blood. Those victims become infected with a rabies-like virus which they go on to spread through their saliva after becoming particularly bitey. It's not worth dwelling too much on the sense of all of this. Cronenberg himself confessed to losing faith in the project. He couldn't make rational biological sense of what he was proposing, and he's certainly a director that needs his films to be set in their own hermetically sealed worlds that make sense, that have their own internal logic. It was his producer at Cinepix who urged him on and stoked his belief in the story, arguing that the sense of it was secondary. The images, the metaphors he was developing were powerful enough on their own. And thank God he did. Because what images they are. Cronenberg's not afraid to court Freudian readings of his work. In Shivers, the parasites looked like penises made out of poo. In Rabid, you don't have to be a student of psychotherapy to understand the subtext of a woman, an actress best known for her work in the porn industry no less, who develops a kind of dick that she uses to attack and penetrate men and later women and feed on their blood. If you're in any doubt that Cronenberg is having fun with this symbolic gender reversal, he makes it crystal clear by having a young patient at the Keloid Clinic at the start of the movie comment on the Freudian undertones of her father paying for yet another nose job to make her nose look less like his. And she does it whilst carrying a book that she's reading about the works of Sigmund Freud. He is in on the joke. Later on in Rabid, there's an attack scene set in a jacuzzi which echoes the swimming pool attack at the end of Shivers. Both of those watery scenes contain very sapphic overtones, and both set me wondering about maybe a Jungian reading of that particular metaphor, a notion of the return to a collective past, a collective unconscious, a Jungian counterbalance perhaps to the outrageous Freudian fun he's having throughout the rest of the movie. If Shivers, as I argued in that video, was akin to George Romero's Night of the Living Dead, then Rabid is perhaps his Dawn of the Dead, which is weird because Rabid came out before Dawn. Rabid is a suitably apocalyptic feel, but just on a wider scale, just as Romero's canvas was expanded from night to dawn. There's a military presence in Rabid, and even a short speaking role for an actor playing a police officer who seems to presage Ken Foree's character in Dawn of the Dead. There's also a kernel of Toby Hooper's life force to be found in Rabid. Marilyn Chambers is an alluring, sexual, predatory female vampire whose victims become infected and are turned into ravaging revenants rather than vampires again in their own right. Hay has been made in the past of the many similarities between some of the body horror in Shivers and Dan O'Bannon's script for Alien, which came out a few years after Shivers. And Dan O'Bannon didn't just write Alien, he also wrote Life Force. So whilst I'm not suggesting foul play, I am wondering whether Dan O'Bannon is a massive fan of David Cronenberg. A couple of quick observations I meant unconnected to the main themes and concerns of the movie. One of them was the scene set in a porno theatre. Marilyn Chambers goes into a porno theatre where she essentially picks up a guy who thinks he's picking her up. He thinks he's the alpha, the predator in control. No. Only in a Cronenberg movie would a character visit a flea pit porno theatre where the dialogue from an unseen porno movie is a meditation on dreams and reality. The other thing I noticed was how amazingly 70s this was, the decade that gave you more shades of brown than you ever thought existed. This, more than anything else, ages Rabid. I swear there is a shot of hotel corridor where our male lead moves down it, and every single colour in frame is a different shade of brown. And now that I've mentioned that male lead, let's talk about the recurring problem of Cronenberg's male leads in his early films. It'll take a while before he gets over this particular hump, but certainly for a number of his early films, it's fair, I think, to level a criticism over his casting of particularly bland leading men. Rabid is no exception, although Frank Moore, who plays Marilyn Chambers' boyfriend, does give me a weird vibe of Cronenberg to come. He really reminds me of Christopher Walken's Johnny Smith in The Dead Zone, which was another film that was criticised for being cold and emotionless, which is demonstrably nonsense, but we'll get onto The Dead Zone in good time. Shivers was an unexpected hit, so Cinepix naturally asked Cronenberg if he had anything else in the bag, like Shivers. Perhaps it's no surprise then that some of the themes and beats are essentially remixes of what he'd already produced in Shivers, without perhaps the focused meditation on theme that the contained setting of Shivers afforded him. One thing is certain though, with a broader canvas to work on, stunt works, car crashes, military vehicles, it's clear from the opening shots that he loves filming the motorcycles. Street crowds, larger set pieces, on a technical level Cronenberg has leveled up. Exposition and scenes of pure dialogue are more streamlined than they were in Shivers, a lot less clunky. There's still some clangers. News items on the TV and radio standing in for a lot of the spreading contagion are just exposition. There's still a lot of telling and not showing. However, some of that will necessarily be down to budgetary constraints. Rabid clearly reveals a director growing in ability and confidence. And his voice is still developing, still evolving. And I think what we'll see as we move through more of his films is that once he has a true handle on that voice, after a period of wild experimentation, Cronenberg will begin a process of distillation, paring back down to get to the essence of what he's talking about. But we're not there yet, though. We're still very much in the wild phase of exploration and creation as we move to his next fascinating film. But by crikey, we'll get to see what truly great actors do with Cronenberg's material, because when we move on next to The Brood, that's a film that contains Samantha Eggar and a certain wonderful Mr. Oliver Reed.